living under someone else's roof for 10 years. I spoiled Victoria Sterling into a bona fide princess. When she had her period, I made her hot cocoa and prepared heating pads. When she cut class, I covered for her. When she brought thugs to beat me, I suffered in silence. It wasn't until she shook off my hand in the fire, running toward that blonde-haired arsonist, and I heard her scream through the thick smoke, "Leave that trash behind," that I truly let go. The first time I stepped into the Sterling estate, I was enveloped by an overwhelming sense of alienation and coldness. The air smelled of expensive leather mixed with some aloof floral scent, and the marble floor, polished to a mirror finish, reflected my dusty old sneakers and the outline of my washed-out jeans. Richard Sterling, my late father's closest brother-in-arms, placed a heavy, broad hand on my bony shoulder, his voice intentionally booming with warmth. "Caleb, this is your home now. Don't be shy." Before his words could settle, a shrill voice, sharp as shards of frozen glass, slashed through the manufactured warmth. "Home? Dad, are you kidding? Where did you dig up this hillbilly to stuff into our house? He stinks." At the top of the winding staircase stood a girl in an exquisite pink dress, looking down on us. She was about half a head shorter than me, with slightly curled black hair framing a face as white as snow, like an expensive porcelain doll in a shop window. Only at this moment, those beautiful big eyes were filled with undisguised disdain and disgust, stabbing straight at me. She was Vicky Sterling, Richard's only daughter, a year younger than me. A flicker of embarrassment and helplessness crossed Richard's face. His wife, Eleanor, a woman of gentle but distant elegance, quickly stepped forward to pull Victoria's arm, whispering, "Vicky, don't be rude. Caleb is going to live with us now. You need to get along. Get along." Victoria yanked her hand away from her mother, her voice pitching higher with the arrogance of invaded territory. "I don't want to live with this dirtbag. Make him leave. This is my house." She stomped down the stairs, deliberately slamming her shoulder hard into mine as she passed, not looking back as she rushed into the living room and cranked the TV volume to a deafening level. My shoulder throbbed, and a sour sting rushed up my nose. I bit the inside of my lip hard, forcing back the tears and humiliation that threatened to spill over. The massive void left by the sudden death of my parents, the terrified bumping of the train ride, and the helplessness of a strange city and a strange family were all infinitely magnified by Victoria's sharp hostility. But I had no retreat. Richard was my only lifeline. This cold, luxurious mansion was the only roof left that could shelter me from the wind and rain. Living under someone else's roof. Those four heavy words were branded onto my 10-year-old heart. Richard kept his word. He used his connections to get me into the prestigious private elementary school Victoria attended, even arranging for us to be in the same second-grade class. On the first day, when the homeroom teacher led me in and introduced me simply, "This is our new student, Caleb Stone," I clearly felt a cold, sharp gaze pierce through the crowd, nailing me in place. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Ugh, like a lingering ghost, Victoria's unmasked mutter reached my ears clearly, carrying her trademark spoiled meanness. The surrounding classmates looked back and forth between us with curiosity. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore that gaze, and squeezed out a shy but polite smile, bowing slightly to the class. "Yabuyuna im Caleb. Nice to meet you." My ability to adapt exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own. Perhaps it was the maturity forced upon me by my parents' sudden death, or perhaps it was a stubbornness in my bones not to waste Richard's charity, but I integrated into the new environment with desperate speed. In class, I absorbed knowledge greedily. After class, I helped classmates with homework and always volunteered for the hardest cleaning duties. At the sports meet, my skinny frame burst with surprising endurance, winning ribbons for the class. My grades skyrocketed like a rocket. By the first midterm, my name was printed at the very top of the honor roll. "Whoa, Caleb, you used 2 different formulas to solve this. That's insane. Caleb, we only won the relay because of your final sprint. Caleb, want to shoot hoops after school?" In the classroom and the hallways, these voices grew more frequent. The sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows onto open textbooks, and the sincere, smiling faces of boys brought a long-lost sense of stability. With a bright smile and undeniable competence, I gradually found my footing in this originally alien place. However, that sunlight seemed destined never to reach Victoria's world. She remained the aloof little princess, beautiful, willful, her temper changing like the weather in June. She was always surrounded by a few girls from similarly wealthy backgrounds who knew how to flatter her. They gathered together, discussing the latest toys, expensive imported snacks, or celebrity gossip. Victoria treated them with a kind of charitable intimacy, sharing when happy, but cutting them with harsh words when she wasn't. Her gaze would occasionally sweep over me, surrounded by classmates. That look was complicated: resentment at being ignored, disdain for my act, and perhaps a flicker of irritation that her territory was being encroached upon. Whenever this happened, she would deliberately raise her voice so I could hear, telling her clique, "Some people, what's the use of good grades? Isn't he just a parasite living off someone else's family? Just looking at him is an eyesore." These words were like tiny needles, densely pricking my heart, but I had long learned to digest them in silence. When the dismissal bell rang, I was always the first to rush out of the classroom. The Sterling family driver only picked up Victoria. I had to catch the scheduled city bus. Back at the house, the massive villa usually held only me and the housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins. Richard and Eleanor seemed to have endless work and social engagements. The huge home was like a magnificent, empty hotel. They only occasionally returned to sleep, leaving enough allowance and a breezy, "Listen to Mrs. Higgins." The kitchen became my sanctuary and the place where I clumsily fulfilled a certain duty. I remembered Victoria hated onions, ginger, and garlic, and detested any meat with fat on it. I knew the approximate dates of her cycle and would remind Mrs. Higgins a day in advance to have hot chocolate and heating pads ready. I knew she was scatterbrained and always rushed out in the morning, so I habitually checked her backpack in the foyer. If I found forgotten homework or art supplies, I silently stuffed them into my bag, brought them to school the next morning, and slipped them into her desk drawer before she arrived. She never said thank you. Sometimes she found out and snatched them away impatiently. Stop meddling. Sometimes she pretended not to see. More often, she simply didn't care if she had her homework or not. Her life's focus seemed forever outside the classroom. I would cook dinner, usually 3 simple dishes and a soup, place them on the table, and cover them. Mrs. Higgins would clean up. Victoria, however, rarely came home on time. Her so-called hanging out was nothing more than blowing allowance at the mall arcade or checking out new dessert shops with her clique for photos. Often, I sat in the living room doing homework, waiting until the food went cold before hearing the sound of her key in the lock, bringing the noise of the outside world and the scent of sickly sweet perfume. "Yo, the hillbilly is still here." She'd kick off her shoes, not even looking at me, her tone always spiked. "What? Waiting to heat up my dinner. Save it." I ate. Days like this ran like a programmed loop, day after day. My endurance and effort were nothing more than expected servitude in her eyes, or even a lowly form of sucking up. The dull ache of living under someone else's roof was ground in repeatedly by her harsh words and cold back. Yet, deep down, the memory of Richard's large hand gripping my trembling shoulder at my father's funeral, suppressing his own grief and his raspy but solemn promise, "Caleb, from now on, my house is your house," remained the reason I swallowed all the bitterness. That debt of gratitude was the only rope I could grab while sinking in the mud. Heavy, but it was everything I couldn't and wouldn't let go of. The quiet days were thoroughly torn apart in the second semester of sophomore year by a transfer student. A guy named Jax Ryder transferred into class 5 next door. He was tall, with bleached blonde hair that stung the eyes and a stud earring glinting in one ear. He was like a stone thrown into stagnant water, instantly creating massive ripples. He played basketball with flashy moves, played the guitar, and whenever he met a pretty girl in the hallway, he could perfectly throw a roguish smile and a few witty lines picked up from who knows where. Soon, he became the undisputed boy of the grade, always surrounded by a group of jeering guys and attracting the open or secret gazes of many girls. He clearly noticed Victoria. The halo of the Sterling family heiress, combined with her undeniably flawless face and the "stay away from me" arrogance she radiated, was undoubtedly an attractive challenge for someone like Jax, who sought thrills and conquest. His offensive was rapid and direct. Every morning, a cup of expensive bubble tea would inevitably appear on Victoria's desk, accompanied by a card with ambiguous flirtations. During recess, he would coincidentally appear near her, unashamedly whistling or loudly cracking attention-grabbing jokes. After school, his black motorcycle, modified with an exhaust pipe that roared like thunder, would be arrogantly parked in the most conspicuous spot at the school gate, drawing sideways glances. He leaned against the bike, his posture lazy yet aggressive, his gaze locked only on Victoria. At first, Victoria scoffed. She was used to being the center of the universe. Jax's bad boy approach might have been novel to her, but it wasn't enough to make her lower her guard. She went home with her friends as usual, turning a blind eye to the burning gaze at the school gate. But Jax's patience and methods exceeded my expectations. He changed tactics and began running into Victoria's friends, treating them generously to meals and small gifts, easily breaching the small fortress around her. Through them, he pinpointed Victoria's favorite singers, the limited edition bag she wanted but couldn't get, and even the reasons for her recent bad moods. He started commenting on the songs she shared on social media, his words surprisingly hitting home. He pulled strings to buy that limited edition bag, and, when she was annoyed about her grades again, casually gave it to her. She was only human, especially a teenage girl spoiled since childhood, craving attention and excitement. The ice on Victoria's face began to melt bit by bit under Jax's relentless, varied, and passionate offensive. She started to let the corners of her mouth tick upward when he delivered tea. She would look away uncomfortably rather than rolling her eyes when meeting his gaze during recess. And after school, facing his flashy motorcycle, her steps would involuntarily slow down. The first time I saw Victoria get on the back of Jax's bike was on a Friday evening. The setting sun dyed the sky a golden red. Victoria, in her short skirt, her long hair blown by the wind, hesitated for a moment before reaching out to wrap her arms around Jax's waist. The motorcycle let out a deafening roar, like a black lightning bolt, carrying the two of them out of the school gates and vanishing into the traffic in an instant, leaving only the pungent smell of exhaust and the envious or shocked whispers of classmates. In that moment, standing in the crowded after-school rush, I felt nailed to the spot. It felt like a cold hand had gripped my heart, squeezing it tight before letting it drop heavily. A terrible premonition, like icy vines, instantly wrapped around me. Events confirmed my worries. Victoria began to be frequently late, leave early, and even skip evening study hall. Her textbooks stayed pristine, while the blank spaces in her workbooks grew. She came home later and later, smelling of strange cigarette smoke. Occasionally, there was a faint trace of alcohol. Into the arrogance in her eyes mixed a kind of almost manic haze. She stopped mocking me because her attention was completely consumed by Jax and his world. I had become an irrelevant background character. Watching the dark circles under her eyes deepen and the shocking downward curve of her grades, I couldn't sit still. Richard and Eleanor were perpetually away, their phone calls limited to "do you have enough money?" and "be good," almost completely ignorant of their daughter's changes. I couldn't watch her be dragged into the abyss. That would betray Richard's trust. One weekend, while Victoria was out with Jax again, I dialed Richard's number. The phone rang for a long time before being answered, the background filled with the noise of conference. I explained the situation as concisely as possible. Victoria was getting very close to a delinquent outside of school, skipping class, coming home late, and her grades were tanking. There was silence on the other end for a full 30 seconds before Richard's voice came through, filled with incredulous rage and exhaustion. "What? That ungrateful. How dare she? Caleb, are you sure?" "I'm sure, Uncle Richard. The guy's name is Jax Ryder. He has a bad reputation, gets into fights a lot." "Okay, I got it. You, keep an eye on her for me. I'll handle this immediately." Richard's voice was decisive, carrying the authority of someone used to command. Richard's handling came swift and fierce. The next evening, he appeared at the house, travel-worn and face ashen with anger. Victoria was humming a song as she walked in the door, but her smile froze the instant she saw her father. "Get down here, now!" Richard bellowed, his voice shaking the chandelier. He pointed a trembling finger at Victoria's nose. "I spent a fortune on your education so you can run around with thugs? Skipping class? Missing study hall? Riding motorcycles? And street racing with trash? Victoria, do you have any respect for your father? Any respect for the rules?" Victoria was terrified by her father's fury, her face pale, but the flame of rebellion immediately lit up in her eyes. "My life is none of your business. Except for giving money, when have you ever cared about me? Jax treats me better than any of you." "Better? What good can that social debris give you?" Veins bulged on Richard's forehead. "I'm warning you, Victoria. Starting today, phone confiscated. Straight home after school. If I find out you have any contact with that blonde punk again, I'll pull you out of school. I'll hire tutors and lock you in this house until you graduate. Do you hear me?" The severe punishment and unprecedented hardline attitude temporarily suppressed Victoria's rebellion. She slammed the door to her room, and for the next few days, she did indeed rein it in. Her phone was gone. She came home on time, but she was like a suppressed volcano, her face dark, filling the house with suffocating tension. She knew exactly who had snitched. The volcano had to erupt eventually. It was a gloomy afternoon, long after the dismissal bell, and the school building was mostly empty. I had been called to the office to help organize some competition materials, which delayed me. Just as I walked out of the empty building, intending to cut through the quiet alley leading to the side gate to catch my bus, my path was blocked. Leading them was Jax. A cigarette dangled from his lips, and his face wore a sinister, triumphant grin. Behind him stood 3 or 4 sleazy-looking guys who were clearly not students. Victoria stood beside Jax, arms crossed, chin held high, glaring at me with eyes cold and venomous, looking at a traitor. Well, if it isn't our straight-A student, the Sterling family watchdog, Jax exhaled a smoke ring, walking over slowly, bringing a choking smell of tobacco. Heard you have a loose tongue? Like snitching? My heart sank. I instinctively took a step back, but my spine hit the cold brick wall. The alley was narrow and dim, and both ends were blocked by their people. Vicky, is this him? Jax tilted his head, deliberately asking Victoria in an intimate tone. Victoria stared at me, the corners of her mouth pulling into a malicious arc, her voice crisp and cold. That's him. Eats my food, lives in my house, and dares to stir up trouble in front of my dad. Jax, teach this ungrateful backstabber a lesson he won't forget. Hear that? Jax grinned savagely, crushing the cigarette but against the wall. The princess has spoken. Boys, serve him up. Before his voice fell, a fist accompanied by the sound of wind smashed hard into my stomach. Severe pain exploded instantly. I groaned, doubling over in agony. Immediately, a rain of fists and kicks fell from all directions. I instinctively curled up, arms tightly protecting my head and face. Hard shoe tips kicked my ribs, back, and legs, burning, searing pain. Crude curses and mocking laughter echoed in the narrow alley. Someone grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the rough brick wall. That's for running your mouth. Hillbilly. Parasite. Remember, my girl's business is none of your damn business, dog. Amid the chaos, through the gap in my arms, I saw Victoria standing just a few steps away. She didn't lift a finger, just watched coldly, expressionless, as if the person being beaten before her wasn't human, but an eyesore of a trash bag. Those beautiful eyes held nothing but pure indifference and satisfaction. Jax had his arm around her shoulder, looking smug. Every punch, every kick came with the dull thud of bone and flesh, accompanied by sharp pain. But what hurt more was Victoria's frozen gaze. My stomach churned, and I tasted the rusty sweetness of blood. Consciousness struggled on the edge of pain and dizziness. I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe only a few minutes, but it felt like a century. The beating stopped. Jax's voice carried the satisfaction of a predator. All right, leave him a breath. Vicky, feel better? Victoria didn't speak, just let out a contemptuous hum. Kid, listen up. Jax squatted down, grabbing my hair to force my bloodied and dusty face up to meet his hideous grin. You meddle again, and next time it won't just be flesh wounds. Get lost. They let go of me like dropping garbage, laughing as they clustered around Victoria and swaggered away. The alley returned to a dead silence, leaving only my heavy, painful panting and the drops of blood falling into the dust. I collapsed on the cold, filthy ground, hurting everywhere. My face was a sticky mess. I couldn't tell if it was blood, sweat, or tears. I struggled, propping my body up with trembling arms, leaning against the rough, cold wall, moving inch by inch like a broken puppet, stumbling out of that dark, humiliating alley. When I got home, the sky was completely dark. The villa was blazing with lights. Victoria was sitting on the living room sofa watching TV, eating imported fruit as if nothing had happened. Hearing the sound of the door, she didn't even lift an eyelid. Mrs. Higgins gasped in horror as she came out of the kitchen and saw my wretched appearance. Oh my God, Caleb, what happened to you? Did you fall? How did you get like this? Yeah, accidentally. Took a spill. I kept my head down, my voice hoarse and slurred, afraid to let her see the wounds clearly as I walked quickly toward my room on the first floor. Mrs. Higgins, I'm fine. I'll just wash up. Closing the door, I slid down against the cold panel to the floor. Waves of pain assaulted my body, reminding me of everything that had just happened. The mirror reflected a face too tragic to look at. Eyes swollen purple, corner of the mouth split. A large patch of skin scraped off my forehead, oozing blood. Arms, back, legs, bruises, and scrapes everywhere. Cold water washed over the wounds, bringing sharp stings. I clenched my teeth, not making sound. Looking at my battered self in the mirror, one thought was crystal clear. I cannot tell Richard. Not to protect Victoria, and certainly not out of fear of Jax's threats, but because once Richard knew Victoria had condoned outsiders beating me this brutally, the fragile veil holding this family together would be completely torn apart. Richard would be furious. He would punish Victoria, but eventually, the misplaced guilt and the pain of being caught in the middle would backlash 1,000 times over. I owed Richard too much. I couldn't be the final straw that crushed the relationship between him and his daughter. The next day, I went to school wearing that colorful face, naturally causing quite a stir. The homeroom teacher asked with concern. I only said I rode my bike into a ditch. Classmates were skeptical. Victoria sat in her seat, spinning a pen, her occasional glances carrying a trace of imperceptible mockery and triumph. A few days later, Richard called to ask about things at home. I held the receiver, listening to his slightly tired voice, and finally said calmly, "Uncle Richard, Vicky, seems to be in contact with Jax again. She probably hasn't been going to evening study hall much." A heavy sigh and suppressed anger came from the other end. "That girl, simply lawless. I know. Caleb, I'm sorry you have to deal with this. Sigh." He didn't finish the sentence, but that heavy sigh contained too much helpless guilt and parental anxiety. He didn't mention the injuries on my face. Maybe he didn't know, or maybe he knew but could only choose silence. I lowered my eyes and said softly, "It's okay, Uncle Richard. Don't worry too much." The phone clicked off, leaving a busy signal. I stood there, the wounds on my face still throbbing. Was it unfair? Of course. But more than that, there was a deep exhaustion and resignation. Gratitude was a mountain I carried. I was destined to trek silently in Victoria's shadow. Second semester of junior year. Academic pressure tightened like a noose. Under her father's high-pressure warnings, Victoria outwardly reined it in. Her phone was confiscated, and she came home on time, but the gloom and impatience on her face were nearly overflowing. Her attitude toward me added a layer of tangible loathing to the cold indifference, as if I were the root of all her loss of freedom. However, Jax was like a parasite. He always found a way in. Victoria started losing things: a limited edition pen, a newly bought hair clip, an irrelevant book. Then, she would have to rush to the convenience store near the school gate during breaks or after school to look for them. And Jax would coincidentally be waiting there, sometimes handing her a bubble tea, sometimes just smiling roguishly through the glass window. She even started getting stomach aches, frequently asking to leave evening study hall for the nurse's office. I knew that jumping the low wall behind the nurse's office led to a quiet path. Victoria thought she was being secretive, but those clumsy excuses and her sudden frailty couldn't escape my eyes. But since the alley incident, I chose silence. Snitching only brought deeper hostility and crazier revenge. I could only watch as a bystander as she carefully tested boundaries, probed the edge of danger, and returned with a secret excitement and satisfaction, the fire of rebellion never truly extinguished. Until that humid, early summer night, the bell-ending evening study hall dispersed the noise of the school building. Carrying a heavy backpack, I walked alone on the shortcut to the bus stop, which passed through an old residential area. The streetlights were dim yellow, stingily spilling onto the potholed road, casting twisted shadows. The air was sticky like congealed oil, broken only by the distant barking of dogs and the chirping of summer insects. Just as I was about to leave this area and turn into a narrower, dead-end alley piled with debris, a suppressed, intermittent sobbing and a man's rough cursing abruptly tore through the night silence, coming from the depths of that dark alley. "Crying? What are you crying for? Ungrateful bitch, huh? Acting all high and mighty? Have I treated you bad since you've been with me? Cry again, and see if I don't handle you right here." My heart seized, feet nailed to the ground. That voice, it was Jax. A chill shot from my soles up my spine. I held my breath, moving carefully to the mouth of the alley. Borrowing the weak light from a nearby window, I peeked in. Deep in the alley were several blurry figures. Jax had his back to me, violently pulling a girl's hair, forcing her to look up. The girl was frail, her school uniform jacket pulled askew, face covered in tear tracks and clear slap marks, blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. She bit her lip hard, her body shaking violently from fear and pain, making sounds like a whimpering small animal. Two sleazy guys stood by, arms crossed, watching the show. "Maya, don't push your luck." Jax's voice was full of hostility. He leaned close to the girl's face, spit practically spraying her. "Your parents are dead. You've got nothing but a senile grandmother collecting cans to feed you. What kind of princess are you pretending to be? Being my side piece is too good for you? Being noticed by me is a blessing. Get it, Maya?" The name struck my brain like lightning. First in the grade. The girl whose name was always at the very top of the honor roll, followed by a string of awe-inspiring scores. The girl who always wore a washed-out uniform, walking hurriedly through the crowd with her head down, like a silent blade of grass. Her parents, dead. Grandmother collecting cans? A massive shock and the sting of shared misery instantly grabbed me. Watching the despairing tears in Maya Brooks' eyes and the violence her frail body was enduring, blood rushed to my head. Fear was suppressed by intense anger. I can't fight them head on. I forced myself to calm down, quickly pulling out my phone. Fingers trembling from nerves, I silenced it and dialed 911. Lowering my voice, I reported the location and the violence as fast as I could. Hanging up, my heart hammered in my chest. The police would take time. Seeing Jax, seemingly enraged by Maya's silent resistance, raising his hand to strike again, I didn't have time to think. I bent down, grabbed a loose half-brick from the corner, took a deep breath, and charged into the alley. "Stop! Jax!" I roared with all my strength, the sound exploding in the narrow alley, carrying a tremor even I hadn't noticed. Everyone jumped, turning around sharply. Seeing it was me, the shock on Jax's face instantly turned to rage and disdain. "Damn it! You again, you haunting watchdog? You got a death wish." He shoved Maya away, and she stumbled to the ground. "Shit! Jax, it's the Sterling kid." "Just in time. We'll settle old scores and new." Jax grinned savagely, rushing at me with the two thugs. I gripped the brick, adrenaline spiking, fear and anger intertwining. Just in that split second, piercing sirens suddenly erupted from the alley entrance. Red and blue flashing lights instantly illuminating the dim space. "Police! Nobody move!" Jax and the two thugs turned pale, frozen in place. Jax reacted fast, roaring, "Run!" The three of them scattered like frightened rats, trying to flee deeper into the alley. "Freeze!" The officers rushed in, moving swiftly. In the chaos, I ignored Jax and ran to Maya, who had fallen to the ground. She was curled up, body still shaking violently, face streaked with tears, eyes terrified and unfocused. "Maya? Maya? It's okay. The police are here." I crouched down, keeping my voice as gentle as possible, wanting to help her up but afraid to startle her. She seemed called back to some semblance of consciousness by my voice, slowly lifting her head. The flashing lights at the alley entrance cast flickering shadows on her face. Her tear-washed eyes were wet like a frightened deer's, holding the blank fragility of surviving a disaster. The red, swollen handprint on her face and the blood at the corner of her mouth tightened my chest painfully. Amidst this chaotic interplay of light and noise, her gaze met mine. In that instant, everything around us seemed to fade and blur. All I could clearly see were her eyes, clear, yet filled with immense sorrow and terror, like shattered glass. A strong palpitation, something I had never felt before, hit me without warning. My cheeks began to burn uncontrollably, and my ears felt on fire. I didn't dare look into her eyes anymore, awkwardly shifting my gaze, my heartbeat seemingly louder than the sirens. I am okay." Maya's voice was as thin as a mosquito's hum, heavy with nasal congestion. She struggled to stand up but stumbled from weak legs. I instinctively reached out to support her arm. My fingertips touched her cold, trembling skin, and that burning sensation spread from my fingers to my face again. "Careful." My voice was terribly dry. The police quickly controlled the situation. Jax and the two thugs were handcuffed and put in squad cars. Maya and I, as the victim and witness, had to go to the station to give statements. In the police car, we sat side by side with a little distance between us. Silence spread in the cramped space. Several times I wanted to say something, but my throat felt tight. I ended up just stealing glances at her. She kept her head down, hands tightly gripping the hem of her shirt, her profile looking incredibly pale and quiet in the flowing lights outside the window. When we finished the statements and walked out of the precinct, it was late at night. The streets were empty, the night breeze cool. "Thank you." Maya stood at the bottom of the steps, her voice very soft, head still lowered, long hair hiding half her face. "And thank you for calling the police." She paused, seeming to use a lot of strength to say the next words. My name is Maya. Caleb." I answered quickly, feeling the heat returning to my face. "Class 2. Just glad you're okay. Go home quickly, it's late. Your grandmother must be worried." She nodded, didn't speak again, and turned to walk quickly into the heavy night. Her thin back soon disappeared around the corner. A strange softness. The glimpse of her fragile eyes in the alley was clearly branded in my mind, lingering. When I got home, I was surprised to find the living room light still on. Victoria was actually awake, sitting cross-legged on the sofa with the remote, aimlessly flipping channels, looking unhappy. Hearing the door, she immediately turned, her gaze sweeping over me sharply, carrying scrutiny and an inexplicable irritation. So late? Where the hell were you? Her tone was aggressive as always. Exhaustion washed over me instantly. I changed my shoes and walked into the living room, trying to sound calm. Something happened on the way. Jax and his crew were bullying someone, Maya, the top student. I called the cops. They came. Victoria let out a short, harsh laugh, as if she'd heard the biggest joke in the world. She put down the remote, crossed her arms, and leaned forward slightly, those beautiful eyes filled with undisguised mockery and malice. Make it up. Keep making it up. Caleb, your lying skills are getting better. Playing the hero to look good for my dad. And Maya Brooks? You? Give me a break. She stood up, walking toward me step by step, her eyes like poison needles. I bet you were out messing around yourself. Came back late and needed an excuse. What? Trying to be like Jax. Look in the mirror and see what you really are. All words of explanation stuck in my throat. Watching the blatant contempt on her face, a deep sense of powerlessness and cold disappointment drowned me. Exhaustion swept through my body like a tide. I opened my mouth, but finally didn't say another word. I just turned silently, walked into my room, and gently closed the door. Outside, I thought I heard Victoria give a cold, mocking snort. A few days later, a notice was posted on the school bulletin board. Jax Ryder was expelled for gang fighting and serious violations of school rules. The news was a bombshell, creating waves in the quiet campus. Rumors flew, versions varying, but the core was the violence in that dark alley that night. When Victoria saw the expulsion notice, her face went deathly pale. She stood in front of the board, staring at the paper, fingers unconsciously twisting the hem of her shirt. Whispers from surrounding students drilled into her ears. Heard he beat up a girl. Scum. Was it the senior genius Maya? My God, Jax is trash. Thank God someone called the cops, or else. Think it was Caleb from class 2? Balls of steel. The comments pricked Victoria like needles. She turned sharply, practically fleeing the crowd. She finally realized that what I said that night was actually true. Jax, the boy who smiled so brightly and whispered sweet nothings in front of her, was this disgusting behind the scenes. For the next few days, Victoria became unusually quiet. She stopped mocking me, even avoiding my gaze. However, this silence didn't last long. When Jax somehow contacted her again, bombing her with tearful repentance and smooth lies pushing all blame onto misunderstandings and Maya's seduction, the unease and anger in Victoria's heart were easily shaken. She chose to believe Jax's carefully woven lies. She decided Maya had seduced him first, that Jax was just impulsive, and my police call was meddling and trying to break them up. The way she looked at me filled with resentment again, even more than before. Only this time, beneath the resentment, there seemed to be more complex emotions. She continued to sneak out to meet Jax briefly, just more secretively. She started looking at me strangely, especially when I occasionally mentioned Maya's name. The Sterling parents remained busy, depositing a monthly allowance into my account that was considerable for a high schooler. Looking at the balance, an idea sprouted and quickly became clear and firm. Sponsor Maya? This stemmed not only from the hazy feelings born in that alley, but from a deep empathy. We were both treated harshly by fate. I understood the pain of losing parents better than anyone. She lived on her grandmother's scrap collecting. That hardship made my heart heavy just imagining it. My actions were clumsy and careful. I found out which class Maya was in and knew that to save money, she often only ate a cold roll for lunch. So, I started creating opportunities. The first time was during lunch break, holding an extra set of the cafeteria's best meal I'd bought on purpose. I paced in front of class 1 for a long time before finally gathering the courage to stop a girl entering the room. Excuse me, could you get Maya Brooks, please? Maya came out quickly. Seeing me, surprise and awkwardness flashed across her face, fingers instinctively pinching the hem of her washed-out uniform. Caleb, you needed something. My face started burning again. I thrust the lunchbox forward, speaking as fast as if reciting a text. Thank you for testifying for me at the station last time. This is for you. Without waiting for her reaction, I stuffed the box in her hands and turned to leave, walking so fast I almost tripped. Behind me, I heard her low, confused voice, testifying. The second time was a chance encounter at the stairwell. I held a brand new physics workbook and accidentally bumped into her. The book fell. Saw the... I apologized quickly, squatting to pick it up and shoving the workbook into her arms. Here, take this. Thanks for letting me borrow your notes last time. Although although I never actually borrowed them. Anyway, thanks. I fled again, leaving Maya holding the new book at the top of the stairs, looking bewildered. The third time, I lost a very expensive imported pen and anxiously asked at the door of Class 1. Maya's desk mate just happened to find it. When Maya came out to return the pen, I looked into her clear eyes, heart drumming, and forgot all my prepared lines. I blurted out, Maya, to thank you for finding my pen. Can I buy you dinner? Just in the cafeteria. After saying it, I wanted to crawl into a hole. Maya looked at my embarrassed state, then at the obviously expensive pen, and fell silent for a few seconds. Just when I thought I'd be rejected, she nodded slightly, a very faint smile appearing on her face. Okay, that meal was incredibly nervous. My palms were sweaty. But Maya was quiet and peaceful. We talked about studying, about the physics problem that stumped me, about the colleges we wanted to attend. When the name Harvard came from both our mouths simultaneously, we paused, then looked at each other and smiled. No mention of the darkness of that night. No mention of our heavy family backgrounds. A subtle understanding and a sense of shared purpose quietly grew over simple food and soft conversation. From then on, a new, hopeful rhythm quietly integrated into my gray life. After school, I no longer rushed to catch the bus home to face Victoria's cold face or the empty house. More often, I would stay with Maya in the classroom to study or find a quiet corner in the library. We shared notes, discussed difficult problems, and quizzed each other. Her mind was agile, her fundamentals astoundingly solid. My reactions were fast, often finding unexpected angles to solve problems. We became the best study partners, compensating for and pushing each other. Harvard, initially a distant dream, gradually became a clearly visible goal we needed to climb toward together. Every mock exam, seeing our names right next to each other on the honor roll, the secret joy and motivation were enough to wash away all the gloom of living under someone else's roof. However, this ray of sunlight couldn't escape Victoria's eyes. One evening at dinner, watching me rush to leave again, Victoria spoke up out of the blue, her tone dripping with sarcastic venom. Yo, going to meet your little lovebird again? One living on charity, one picking through trash. TSK, truly. A match made in heaven. Her words were like poison needles, accurately striking the most painful wounds for both Maya and me. The hand gripping the doorknob tightened, knuckles turning white. A wave of anger rushed to my head. I almost turned to argue. But when I looked up at her, I caught a flash of complex emotion in her eyes. Besides the mean sarcasm, there was actually a trace of jealousy. That look was like a cat whose territory had been invaded, full of irritation and unwillingness. This unexpected discovery was like a bucket of cold water, instantly extinguishing my anger, leaving only absurdity and a cold clarity. I said nothing in the end, just opened the door and walked out silently, shutting Victoria and her complicated gaze behind me. The moment the door closed, I seemed to hear the sound of something being slammed heavily onto the table inside. The footsteps of college applications drew closer. The air was thick with the smell of anxious ink and sweat. Late one night, a week before the big exams, the sound of a key turning came from the foyer. Richard was back, wearing the fatigue of travel. The atmosphere at the dinner table was subtle. Victoria buried her head in her food, silent. Richard's gaze swept back and forth between Victoria and me, finally landing on me with a deliberately casual tone, as if making small talk. Caleb, how's the review going? Decided on a college yet? With your grades, the top ones in Boston shouldn't be a problem, right? My heart sank. I instantly understood the heavy weight behind that seemingly casual question. He wanted me to go to the same university as Victoria. Even if Victoria's grades weren't enough for the Ivy League, with the Sterling family's wealth and connections, there was always a way to get her in somewhere nearby. He needed someone to continue taking care of this daughter who worried him sick but left him helpless. This was the continuation of gratitude, the price of living under his roof, a silent command. The table was so quiet, only the slight clinking of silverware remained. Victoria stopped eating too. Though she didn't look up, I could feel her gaze like an invisible probe focusing on me, carrying a trace of imperceptible tension and expectation. My throat was dry. I put down my chopsticks, raised my head to meet Richard's gentle but undeniably pressured gaze, and tried to make my tone sound calm and sincere. Uncle Richard, thank you for your concern. I want to aim for Harvard. That is my goal. I didn't look at Victoria. I clearly stated my direction. Harvard was the future Maya, and I had agreed upon. It was the only light I could grasp that belonged to me. The smile on Richard's face paused slightly, a ruthless look flashing in his eyes, but it was quickly covered. He nodded, his tone still warm. Harvard is good. Top tier. Ambitious. Uncle supports you. Vicky, he turned to his daughter, his tone taking on a hardness hard to detect. You should learn from Caleb. Focus these last few days. Stop thinking about nonsense. Victoria huffed through her nose, slammed her bowl down, and left the table, the chair legs scraping a harsh sound across the smooth floor. The summer after graduation was stiflingly hot, like a giant steamer. The cicadas screamed themselves hoarse, making people restless. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling villa, the manicured lawn steamed lifelessly under the scorching sun. The house was empty. Richard and Eleanor had gone to some distant city for important business, and Mrs. Higgins was on leave back home. In the huge house, only Victoria and I remained, like two strangers trapped in a luxurious cage, occupying corners of the space. The air was filled with silent gunpowder and suffocating quiet. Victoria's mood was a roller coaster. The relief after exams was quickly replaced by a massive emptiness and inexplicable irritability. She locked herself in her room all day with music blasting, or paced the living room in her pajamas, ignoring me, yet acting as if my very existence irritated her nerves. That night was unusually muggy, not a breath of wind. Outside was pitch black, storm clouds hanging low, brewing a tempest. I had just showered and was pouring water in the living room in a tank top and shorts. Suddenly, a rapid, violent knocking exploded at the door, sounding exceptionally harsh in the quiet villa, carrying a brute force. My heart skipped a beat. Before I could put down the glass, Victoria's door yanked open with a bang. She swept past me like a gust of wind, practically throwing herself at the door with a complex expression mixing nervousness, excitement, and a trace of guilt. She yanked open the heavy carved wooden door. Standing outside was Jax. He looked terrible. That trademark blonde hair was greasy and messy, face sickly pale, eyes sunken and bloodshot. His cheap black t-shirt was wrinkled and stained. More jarring were the scabs from cuts visible on his exposed arms and neck. He radiated an intense, unsettling aura of decay and hostility, like a trapped beast driven to desperation. Vicky, seeing Victoria, Jax's eyes instantly erupted with a nearly manic light, his voice hoarse. Quick, let me in. Someone is chasing me. Victoria was clearly frightened by his appearance, panic flashing across her face, but it was overridden by heartache and instinctive defense. She immediately stepped aside. Come in quick. Jax slipped in like an eel, turning to slam the door. I rushed over, slamming my hand against the wood, cold metal biting my palm. I blocked the door, eyes scanning the suspicious wounds on Jax and the lingering terror in his eyes. My voice was cold and hard. Victoria, you can't let him in. Look at him, he's in deep trouble. Caleb, who do you think you are? Get the hell out of the way. Victoria bristled like a cat whose tail was stepped on, shoving my arm, screaming, This is my house. I'll let in whoever I want. It's not your place to manage me. Jax, get inside. Taking the opening, Jax slammed his shoulder into me, knocking my hand off the door, and slipped fully inside, not forgetting to shoot me a glare full of threat and disdain. A cold sense of powerlessness and a premonition of massive danger seized me. I looked at Victoria's face, slightly twisted from excitement and paranoia, watching her unhesitatingly choose to harbor this man who clearly brought disaster. The last shred of belonging I felt for this home extinguished completely. Arguing was pointless. Living under someone's roof was, in the end, living under someone's roof. Suit yourself. I withdrew my hand, not looking at them again. My voice was calm, without a ripple. I turned and walked straight to my room on the first floor, locking the door. Outside, I could faintly hear Victoria's lowered, urgent questions and Jax's mumbled explanations. I slept uneasily that night. The storm finally broke outside, bean-sized raindrops hammering the glass, sounding like countless hands slapping frantically. Thunder rolled in the heavy clouds, the dull booms moving from far to near. The air smelled of the earthiness brought by the rain, mixed with a lingering, heart-palpitating anxiety. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe deep night, maybe early morning. A strong, pungent smell of burning, like a cold, venomous snake, shot up my nose. I woke instantly, bolting upright. The room was pitch black, but under the door crack, dancing orange light seeped through. Smoke was wisping in. No. Fire. Massive terror grabbed my heart. I scrambled off the bed, coughing violently as the smoke hit my lungs. Pulling the door open, the scene froze my blood. The living room was a sea of fire. Raging flames like countless dancing red vipers greedily devoured the expensive sofa, curtains, carpets. Thick smoke rolled upward, already blackening the crystal chandelier. The ceiling groaned under the strain. Waves of searing heat hit my face, carrying the scent of death. Victoria! Vicky! I screamed, covering my nose and mouth with a wet towel, rushing toward the second floor regardless of everything. The banister was scorching hot. Smoke blinded me, tears streaming. I kicked open Victoria's door. The smoke was thinner in the room. Victoria was curled up in the corner of the bed, terrified, coughing uncontrollably. Her pajamas were soaked in sweat, face streaked with tears and soot. Go! Move! I rushed over, grabbed her arm, and dragged her off the bed. She seemed paralyzed with fear, stumbling as I pulled her out. Just as we rushed out of the room to the second floor landing, the fire in the living room below had become even more terrifying. Flames almost blocked the way down. The heat wave scorched our skin. Cough! No! No! Victoria suddenly screamed, struggling violently. Jax! Jax is still inside, hiding in my bathroom. He's still in there. I have to get him. Like a mad woman, she actually shook off my hand, turning to run back toward the hallway engulfed in smoke and heat. That way led to her master bathroom. Victoria, you're crazy. The fire's too big. Come back. I was horrified, lungs burning, vision going black. Watching her rush recklessly into the fire, a massive anger and a cold despair of being utterly abandoned drowned me. But my body reacted faster than my reason. I couldn't watch her die. I gritted my teeth, covered my face with the towel, and chased her into the smoke-filled corridor. Visibility was near zero. The heat felt like countless red-hot needles piercing every inch of skin. The ceiling decorations crackled in the fire, burning debris constantly falling. We dodged with difficulty. Jax! Jax! Where are you? Victoria cried out hoarsely, running like a headless fly between her door and the hallway, the smoke distorting her voice. Cough! Vicky! I'm here. A raspy voice came faintly from the direction of her master bedroom, sounding panicked. Victoria acted like she heard a heavenly choir. She perked up and immediately rushed toward the voice regardless of safety. Jax! Wait for me! Just then, a terrifying, tooth-aching crack came from above. I jerked my head up, pupils shrinking. A massive slab of burning drywall and framing, glowing red, was crashing down right toward Victoria's head. Look out! Screaming with every ounce of strength, instinct outpaced thought. I lunged forward, slamming hard into Victoria to knock her away. Ah! Victoria screamed as she hit the floor. Boom! A muffled crash accompanied by bone-shattering agony exploded across my back and shoulder. Searing pain swept through my body instantly. The heavy drywall slammed solidly onto my back. My vision went black, air squeezed violently from my lungs, smoke and searing air rushing in to fill the void. My ears rang, hearing vaguely Victoria's terrified scream and other hurried footsteps approaching, mixed with her tearful shout. Jax, run. Leave that trash behind. Consciousness was a kite with a cut string, plummeting rapidly through pain and suffocation. Darkness, like a cold tide, surged up gently but cruelly, completely drowning all light and sound. In my last shred of perception, a figure seemed to stumble past me, stirring a weak current of air running toward the stairs. I don't know how long passed before consciousness struggled to surface from the dark water like a sunken ship. The first thing I felt was ubiquitous pain, especially in my back and shoulder, burning, tearing agony with every breath. My throat and lungs felt sandpaper dry and stinging. The smell of antiseptic drilled aggressively into my nose. Struggling to open heavy eyelids, the harsh white light made me squint. Blurry vision gradually focused. White ceiling, white walls, and several faces written with worry and exhaustion by the bed. Richard, Eleanor, and Victoria. Victoria stood behind her parents, face pale as paper, heavy dark circles under her eyes, hair messy. She was no longer the aloof princess. Her eyes dodged, afraid to meet mine. When my gaze landed on her, she flinched perceptibly, quickly lowering her head, hands wringing together. Within those eyes that used to hold arrogance and disgust, there was now, clearly, guilt and a trace of bewildered fear. Caleb, you're awake. How do you feel? Does it hurt? Richard's voice was terribly hoarse, carrying the relief and fear of survival. He leaned down, eyes full of red veins and deep fatigue. The doctor said, Eleanor's voice choked, eyes red-rimmed. Back and shoulder have crush injuries and severe burns. Inhaled a lot of toxic smoke. Miracle. Miracle the spine and internal organs are okay. Need to rest. She couldn't continue, covering her mouth with a handkerchief. Richard sighed heavily, the sound weighing 1,000 pounds. He sat on the chair by the bed, wiped his face, and began to recount what happened after I passed out. His voice was low and suppressed, full of anger and deep powerlessness. Turns out, Jax was involved in a serious casino brawl out of town, severely injuring a henchman of a powerful local boss. The other side put a hit on him. He fled in panic, nowhere to go, and thought of the high-security Sterling estate. He used unknown means to sneak in and contacted Victoria, telling her someone was chasing him and begging for a night's shelter. Victoria softened and let him in. The people chasing him tracked Jax down and used equally shady means to locate the villa. Late at night, they doused the perimeter and windows with gasoline and lit this devastating fire. The goal was Jax's life, not caring if the whole house went with him. Luckily, the community fire system triggered, and the fire department came fast. Richard's voice trembled with aftershocks. When they broke in, you were knocked out by debris in the second-floor hallway. Vicky and Jax had just run down. Vicky was in shock. That bastard Jax tried to run. Richard's fist clenched, knuckles white, eyes shooting terrifying anger. Those two arsonists were caught on the spot. The mastermind and that disaster Jax. None of them are getting away. I put my reputation on the line, called in every favor. They're all going to prison. Won't see daylight for 10 years. And the community security. Bunch of useless idiots. I'm suing them into bankruptcy. He got more agitated as he spoke, standing up, chest heaving. But when his gaze turned to Victoria, head down and trembling slightly, that sky-high rage seemed forcibly suppressed, turning into an extremely complex, heavy exhaustion and heartache. He opened his mouth, seeming to want to speak, glanced at my battered body, and finally let out an even heavier, more helpless sigh, collapsing back in a chair. The room fell into dead silence. Only the rhythmic beeping of the monitor and Eleanor's suppressed sobbing remained. I understood the words Richard didn't say. He wanted me to keep looking after Victoria, wanted us to go to the same college, wanted to use gratitude and guilt to keep me tied to her. But after experiencing all this, the beating in the alley, the endless cruelty, and especially this fire where I almost died, while she chose to run with Jax screaming, "Leave that trash behind," the last bit of warmth and connection to Victoria, to this home, had been burned to ash, leaving only cold, gray dust. I looked at Victoria, standing by the bed. Her pale profile, bitten lip, and the visible guilt in her eyes could no longer stir any waves in my heart. No resentment, no forgiveness. Just utter, dead calm peace. The debt was paid. Paid with my life. From now on, we owed each other nothing. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows on the white hospital floor. The door pushed open a crack, and Victoria's figure appeared stiffly in the doorway. She seemed to have dressed up intentionally today, hair tied back, wearing a plain beige dress, light makeup trying to cover the haggardness, though the redness and dark circles were still obvious. She held a thermos carefully, fingers white from gripping it too hard. She took a deep breath, as if making a huge decision, about to step in. Just then, a clear, gentle female voice came from inside the room, carrying undisguised heartache and scolding. "You are too cruel. Cruel to yourself. The doctor said if that hit was an inch over, the consequences would be unimaginable. How could you be so stupid?" It was Maya. Victoria's feet nailed to the floor, paralyzed. The expression on her face froze from anxiety and hope to a layer of cold frost. Eyes sharp as knives. Immediately, my voice, laced with a helpless smile, rang out clearly. "It's all in the past, Maya. Look, aren't I fine? I can still make it for the start of the semester." The tone was unprecedentedly relaxed and tender. "Fina, you call this fine?" Maya's voice carried a pouty tone, along with a trace of barely suppressed sobbing. "Here, my grandma made me bring this specially. Old hen soup, stewed with herbs, great for recovery. Drink it while it's hot." Then came the soft clink of a spoon against a bowl. Outside the door, Victoria swayed slightly. She stared deathly hard at the exquisitely packaged thermos in her hands. Inside was the chicken soup she had cooked for the first time in her life, clumsily burning her hand in the process. She had thought this might be a sliver of possibility to break the ice. However, the smooth metal surface now coldly reflected her bloodless face and the surging, stung emotions in her eyes. The anger that flared when she heard a girl's voice in my room didn't even have time to burn before it was doused by Maya's too cruel and my gentle, it's all in the past, like a bucket of ice water. Following it was a humiliation named asking for it, and a sharp sense of loss. Inside the room, the soft conversation between Maya and me continued, like tiny knives slicing away her last bit of pride. She stood outside like an abrupt intruder, a complete joke. The thermos became incredibly heavy and burning hot. Finally, she didn't make a sound. She turned sharply, moving so fast she stumbled, head down, fleeing like she was escaping a plague site. Hugging that carefully prepared thermos, she didn't look back as she rushed down the corridor. The rapid, chaotic sound of her shoes hitting the floor soon disappeared into the background noise of the hospital. Only a drop of water remained on the floor where she stood, quickly spreading and evaporating in the dry air, leaving no trace. She never pushed that door open. That bucket of soup carrying her clumsy intentions was never delivered. The sunlight outside remained bright, but it could no longer shine into the suddenly frozen depths of someone's heart. September in Boston. The sun still carried the remnant power of late summer, baking the earth. The ancient, solemn gates of Harvard University stood like a boundary marker to a new life. Beside me was Maya, wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans, a fresh ponytail, looking up at the majestic entrance, her profile quiet and full of hope in the sunlight. We smiled at each other, fingers interlocked, the warmth from our palms soothing our heartbeats. The gloom of the past seemed truly left behind in that burning summer. Richard kept his promise. After I got my acceptance letter, he gave me a bank card with a huge sum, calling it a reward and tuition and living expenses. I didn't refuse. I accepted it calmly, saying, "Thank you, Uncle Richard." This money was what the Sterlings owed me. I took it with a clear conscience. It would be the startup capital for Maya and me. Victoria's exam results were as expected, only good enough for a standard college in the city, several streets away from Harvard. After school started, she seemed like a different person. The sharp edges of the once spoiled princess seemed smoothed down by the fire and the ensuing storm. She no longer spoke harshly to me, and the bone-deep disgust was gone from her eyes, replaced by a hesitant silence and a clumsy, cautious approach. First day of military-style orientation/RTC training. The sun was brutal. Sweat soaked the camo uniforms, running into eyes, stinging. During a break, just as I dragged my leaden legs to the shade, a cold bottle of water appeared in front of me. I looked up. It was Victoria. She was wearing her school's training uniform, cheeks flushed from the sun, sweaty hair sticking to her temples, eyes dodging, voice low. For you. Water. Condensation on the bottle dripped down her pale fingers. Surrounding students instantly cast curious and ambiguous glances. I paused, didn't take it, just looked at her calmly. "Thanks, no need. I brought my own." I shook the worn thermos at my feet. Victoria's hand froze in midair, the color draining from her face. Her lips moved, but finally, she said nothing, silently retracting her hand and turning to walk away quickly. The next morning, dawn was just breaking. The trees outside the dorm rustled in the morning breeze. I had just come back from a run, about to go up to change, when I saw Victoria holding a fancy, insulated bag, waiting at the dorm entrance. She had clearly dressed up, wearing a light blue dress, hair carefully styled. "Caleb." Seeing me, her eyes lit up. She walked over quickly, handing me the bag. "For you. Breakfast. Bowsy and hot milk." "Thanks." I remained calm, but didn't reach out immediately. "But really, don't trouble yourself. I ate at the cafeteria." Truth. To avoid her, I specifically got up early for the cafeteria. The light in Victoria's eyes dimmed instantly, her outstretched hand looking helpless. She stubbornly didn't pull back. "Then, keep it for snack? Or, give it to your roommates." Watching the disappointment and persistence she tried hard to hide, a sigh crossed my heart. Finally, I took the heavy bag. "Thanks, but really, don't bring things anymore." My tone was gentle, but carried an unquestionable distance. "Oh, okay." She lowered her head, voice quiet as a mosquito. However, her concern didn't stop. Water, breakfast, sometimes just a box of cut fruit. Not frequent, but stubbornly continuous. Her presence soon spread through my class and nearby dorms. "Caleb, you player. School just started and a pretty girl is delivering care packages daily? From another school. That girl is gorgeous, looks rich too. You're hiding deep, man." "Hey, hear that? Caleb from class 2. Seems to be two-timing. A genius girlfriend here. And a lovesick heiress from another school delivering food. For real? Doesn't look like that kind of guy. You never know." Rumors buzzed like summer mosquitoes, impossible to wave away. Whenever Maya and I walked on campus, I could feel the gossiping gazes. Maya was a sensitive girl. She heard them too. One evening, walking back to the dorms after the library, the street lamps cast long shadows. Maya was silent for a while, then suddenly spoke softly with a hint of hidden grievance. Caleb, Victoria. Does she still come looking for you a lot? I stopped, turning to look at her. The soft light outlined her delicate profile, lashes lowered, casting shadows, lips slightly pouted. This rare display of jealousy was incredibly cute. I couldn't help but chuckle, reaching out to pinch her cool cheek. Yo, is someone jealous? Why so sour? Maya's face instantly turned red, slapping my hand away. Ooh, who's jealous? I was just asking. She turned away, ears burning. I laughed, taking her hand in mine, interlocking fingers. So this is what she looks like, jealous. Thinking of the girl brave enough to face thugs in the alley versus this blushing girl worried about rumors, the contrast made my heart melt. Don't worry. I tightened my grip, looking in her eyes seriously. My jealous little girl is the only one for me. Victoria. I'll handle it. Maya looked up, clear eyes reflecting the light and my shadow. She gave a soft corners of her mouth finally curving up, squeezing my hand back. The evening breeze, carrying the scent of early autumn, blew away the annoying rumors and the gloom of the past. However, Victoria's concern didn't stop because of rumors. This persistence, carrying the scent of atonement, was like an invisible net, occasionally causing ripples in Maya's heart and annoying me. It was time to put a definitive period on it. Boston's winter came fierce and biting. A first snow fell without warning deep in the night. By morning, the world was wrapped in silver. Fine snow was still drifting, the cold wind whipping flakes against faces painfully. I wrapped my down jacket tight, stepping on crunching fresh snow toward the dorm. From a distance, I saw a familiar figure under the tree. Victoria. She wore a pure, white long down coat, a thick red scarf burying half her face, leaving only a red nose and cheeks exposed. Her black hair was dusted with snow, and she tightly hugged an insulated bag with a high-end restaurant logo. Snowflakes melted on her long lashes like tiny tears. She stomped her feet constantly, breathing hot air into her frozen hands, gaze fixed on the dorm door. Seeing me, her eyes lit up instantly, like two small lamps suddenly ignited in the ice and snow. She walked up quickly, slipping slightly on the snow, a smile of ingratiating hope on her face. She thrust the bag forward, voice trembling from the cold. Caleb, good morning. Brought you breakfast still hot. It snowed. We're more clothes. The bag carried the warmth from her arms. Snow fell between us, melting silently. I stopped, not politely refusing like usual. Snow landed on my lashes, bringing a touch of cold. I looked at this face, once spoiled and willful, now written with caution and hope. Looked at her red frozen fingers and the snow in her hair. My heart was a clear calmness, no waves. I curved my lips slightly, and in a tone that carried a hint of joking banter, spoke clearly, Victoria, thanks for the thought. But I have a girlfriend. The wind and snow seemed to freeze for a moment. Maya, she gets jealous easily. I paused, smile deepening, looking frankly into her frozen smile, and instantly lost eyes. If she sees another girl bringing me breakfast, I'm afraid I'll be sleeping in the hallway tonight. My tone was relaxed, even carrying a sweet indulgence for Maya's jealousy, but my eyes were gentle and firm, holding no ambiguity or hesitation. So, I continued, voice exceptionally clear in the wind. Really, don't trouble yourself anymore. My gaze swept over the bag in her hand, finally landing back on her instantly pale face. My tone became peaceful and solemn, a final release and farewell. As for the past, it's all gone. You don't need to apologize anymore. Finished, it didn't stay. I gave a slight nod, like completing a delayed, formal goodbye. Then I turned, stepping through the thick snow, walking toward the dining hall, toward the steaming hot future where Maya was waiting for me. Behind me was dead silence, only the sound of the wind whistling. I didn't look back, but I could clearly feel that complex gaze that had been following me finally, thoroughly disappear. On the snow, only 2 lines of footprints remained, extending in different directions. Time is like a rushing river, washing away the grit of the past, settling the weight and peace of life. 6 years was enough for a boy to shed his greenness and forge a steady outline in the furnace of society. Maya and I, from the inseparable study couple at Harvard to professionals standing firm in our respective fields, were like 2 trees growing side by side, roots entangled underground, branches holding up the sky together. From the awkwardness of campus to fighting side by side in the workplace, we had long become the most indivisible parts of each other's lives. The girl crying in despair in the dark alley, the girl rushing toward me in the smoke, was now about to become my wife. Days preparing for the wedding were busy and sweet. A week before the ceremony, Maya and I returned to the city that held my entire gray youth. The plane landed, and familiar humid air rushed in. We didn't tell anyone, checking directly into a hotel. Only the next day did I dial that number, gathering dust in my contacts. Uncle Richard, it's me, Caleb. Maya and I are back. We'd like to invite you, Aunt Eleanor, and Victoria to dinner tomorrow. Silence for a few seconds on the other end. Richard's voice carried obvious surprise and a trace of complex emotion, but was quickly covered by forced enthusiasm. Caleb? Hey, good to be back. Good. Tomorrow? No problem. Uncle will arrange it. Must be the best place. Give Uncle a chance to congratulate you properly. Dinner was set at a high-end Chinese restaurant with elegant ambience. Outside the massive windows was the city's glittering nightscape. Maya and I arrived early. She wore a tasteful lavender dress, light makeup, adding a mature charm to her gentle beauty. She seemed a bit nervous, fingers unconsciously rubbing the edge of her teacup. I gently held her hand, smiling reassuringly. Her palm was cool, but her grip back was firm. The door opened. Richard and Eleanor walked in. 6 years had left marks. Richard's temples were frosted, wrinkles deeper, the sharp aura of authority settling into a deeper fatigue and age. Eleanor had aged well, but her eyes held less distance, more gentle twilight. Seeing us, smiles piled onto their faces, smiles holding the emotion of reunion, sincere blessing, and a politeness hard to describe. Caleb, Maya, wow, this is great. Richard strode over, patting my shoulder hard, looking back and forth between us with an elder's gratification. Grown up, successful. Uncle is truly happy for you. His voice was still loud, but lacked the confidence of years past. Eleanor smiled and took Maya's hand, examining her. Maya, right? Such a beautiful, sensible girl. Caleb is lucky. Her tone was intimate, as if trying to wipe away all past estrangements. We sat, and exquisite dishes arrived. The atmosphere was harmonious. They asked about our work and life, full of concern. They tacitly avoided any topic touching the past, only discussing the now and the future. Richard even joked, when you have a baby, Uncle has to be the godfather. Maya and I smiled and responded, handling every concern with grace. Maya's nervousness faded. Eleanor looked at her with genuine affection. However, Victoria never appeared. Vicky. Eleanor seemed to see my question. She put down her chopsticks, tone carrying helplessness and deep worry. That child, ever since he went to college, she changed. Got very quiet, stopped causing trouble. After graduation, she said she wanted to see the world, so she went to London alone. Studying design, working too, only just came back yesterday. Jet lag hasn't worn off, said she was a bit tired, so she didn't come. She asked me to congratulate you for her. Eleanor's voice dropped, carrying a faint sigh. So that's it. I nodded, understanding. It's okay, Andy. Let Victoria rest. Near the end, Richard signaled the waiter to bring a thick red envelope, stuffing it into my hand with irresistible force. Caleb, Maya, take it. Just a little token from Uncle and Annie. Must accept. We won't go to Boston to clutter things up, but our hearts are there. The envelope was thick. I understood this wasn't just a gift, but a late compensation, an attempt to put a material period on that past. I didn't refuse. I took it calmly, thanking them sincerely. Walking out of the restaurant, neon lights flowed in the night. Richard's driver was waiting. Before getting in, Richard suddenly turned, giving me a deep look. That look was extremely complex. Relief, guilt, release, and a loneliness hard to articulate. His lips moved, but finally he just sighed heavily, patted my shoulder, voice lower and raspy than ever. Caleb, take care. You and Maya. Be good to each other. He seemed to run out of strength, turning to get into the car. The black sedan slid silently into the night. Maya and I stood by the road, watching the taillights vanish. Shall we go? Maya took my arm. Yeah. Back at the hotel, just swiping the key card. Maya softly went, Lying quietly on the carpet under the door crack was a pure white, stiff envelope with no markings. I picked it up. High quality. Opened it. No letter, just a photo. The background was the cafe across the street from the restaurant we just left. In the window seat sat a young woman in a beige trench coat. She was in profile, holding a coffee, gazing quietly out the window, right in the direction of our private room. The glass reflected the indoor lights, blurring her figure, but her gazing posture was incredibly clear. It was Victoria. In the photo, she was a different person from the spoiled princess in my memory. Long wavy hair elegantly pinned up, revealing a smooth forehead and graceful neck. Her profile had lost the roundness of girlhood, looking thin and refined. She looked down slightly, long lashes casting a shadow, hiding the emotion in her eyes. Her lips seemed to hold a very faint curve. Not joy, but more like a calmness after weathering storms, a distant peace. She was shrouded in a quiet atmosphere, like a faded old oil painting, bearing the marks of time and a silent detachment. On the back of the photo, in elegant but slightly unfamiliar handwriting, was a single line. Happy wedding. A lifetime of happiness. Vicky, no date. I held the photo, staring for a long time at the quiet woman. The once bone-deep resentment, cold despair, suffocating oppression. All those intense emotions had settled and dissolved in the river of time. Rising in my heart, now, was a blank piece, like a lake in late autumn, ripless. The Victoria who shook off my hand in the fire to run to Jack's. The Victoria who stubbornly handed me breakfast in the snow. The Victoria quietly smiling and sending blessings in the photo. Their figures overlapped and crossed, finally freezing on this detached, peaceful stranger. Gratitude and grudges, the dust of the past, all dissipated thoroughly with that simple blessing on the back of the photo. It's all over, I said softly, not knowing if it was to Maya, to myself, or to the distant shadow in the photo. Maya leaned in, snuggling into my arms, warm and real. She glanced at the photo, asked nothing, just gently tightened her grip on my hand, whispering, "Yeah, it's all over." I placed the photo gently on the hotel desk. The pure white envelope against the dark would look like a fallen feather, silent and still. Outside the window, the city lights still shone, illuminating countless new or old stories. The page belonging to Victoria and me, carrying the ash of fire and the chill of snow, was finally, thoroughly turned over by the wind of time. Goodbye, princess. Don't look back. Story complete.